not too radical. Hare Krishna.
I'll start with the Mongol Charan. Or do we do Jai Radha Madhava also?
No, not.
Oh, okay. I'll begin with a Mongol Charan prayer.
Not Jingle Bells.
I'll pass on that. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shta Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Shta Om Agyantimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Nina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Janmadhyasya Yaton Vayati Taratashtarteshabhingyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridhaya Radhikavaye Muyanti Asuraya Tejo Varimridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sadana Rasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. Aryam Tat Sat. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 23. It's a huge passage, verses 1 through 21. Lots of reading. And then Prabhupada gives kind of a lengthy purport to verse 21. So I'm just going to start because it's going to take some time just to read these things. Let me share my screen here. Okay. We're hearing about the dynasties that came from the Sons of Yayati. So this is verse 1. I'm just going to read the translations and here. Shukadev Goswami said, Anu, the fourth son of Yayati, had 3 sons, named Sabhanara, Chakshu, and Parishnu, O king. From Sabhanara came a son named Kalanara, and from Kalanara came a son named Srinjaya. From Srinjaya came a son named Janamejaya. From Janamejaya came Mahashala. From Mahashala, Mahamana, and from Mahamana 2 sons named Ushinara and Titikshu. The 4 sons of Ushinara were Shibi, Vada, Krimi, and Daksha, and from Shibi again came 4 sons named Vrishadharba, Sudhira, Madra, and Atmatattavit, Kekaya. The son of Titikshu was Rushadrata. From Rushadrata came Homa, from Homa, Sutapa, and from Sutapa, Bali. By the semen of their Gautama and the wife of Bali, the emperor of the world, 6 sons took birth, namely Anga, Vanga, Kalinga, Suma, Undra, and Odra. These 6 sons, headed by Anga, later became kings of 6 states in the eastern side of India. These states were known according to the names of their respective kings. From Anga came a son named Kalapana, and from Kalapana came Divirata. From Divirata came a son named Dharmarata, and his sons was Chitarata, who was celebrated as Romapada, Ramapada, however, was without issue, and therefore his friend Maharaj Dasharatha gave him his own daughter named Shanta. Ramapada accepted her as his daughter, and therefore she married Rishishringa. When the demigods from the heavenly planets fell to shower rain, Rishishringa was appointed the priest for performing a sacrifice after being brought from the forest by the allurement of prostitutes who danced stage theatrical performances accompanied by music and embraced and worshipped him. After Rishishringa came, the rain fell. Thereafter, Rishishringa performed a sun-giving sacrifice on behalf of Maharaj Dasharatha, who had no issue. And then Maharaj Dasharatha had sons. From Ramapada, by the mercy of Rishishringa, Chaturanga was born. And from Chaturanga came Pritulaksha. The sons of Pritulaksha were Brihadrita, Brihadkarma, and Brihadbhanu. From the eldest, Brihadrita, came a son named Brihamana, and from Brihamana came a son named Jayadratha. The son of Jayadratha, by the womb of his wife, Sambhuti, was Vijaya, and from Vijaya, Driti was born. From Driti came Dritavrata, from Dritavrata, Satkarma, and from Satkarma, Adhirata. While playing on the bank of the Ganges, Adhirata found a baby wrapped up in a basket. The baby had been left by Kunti because he was born before she was married. Because Adhirata had no sons, he raised his baby as his own, this baby as his own. This son was later known as Karna. O king, the only son of Karna was Vrishasena. Druhu, the third son of Yayati, had a son named Babru, and the son of Babru was known as Setu. The son of Setu was Arabdha. Arabdha's son was Gandhara, and Gandhara's son was Dharma. Dharma's son was Drita. Drita's son was Durmada. And Durmada's son was Pracheta, who had 100 sons. The Prachetas, the son of Pracheta, accompanied the northern side of India, which was devoid of Vedic civilization, and became kings there. Yayati's second son was Turvasu. The son of Turvasu was Vani, the son of Vani, Bharga, the son of Bharga, Bhanuman. The son of Bhanuman was Tribhanu, and his son was the magnanimous Kanandama. Kanandama's son was Maruta, who had no sons, and who therefore adopted a son of the Puru dynasty, Maharaj Dushmanta, as his own. Maharaj Dushmanta, desiring to occupy the throne, returned to his original dynasty, the Puru dynasty, even though he had accepted Maruta as his father. O Maharaj Parikshit, let me now describe the dynasties of Yadhu, the eldest son of Maharaj Yayati. This description is supremely pious, and it vanquishes the reactions of sinful activities in human society. Simply by hearing this description, one is freed from all sinful reactions. And then today's verses 20 and 21. So just briefly, we were previously hearing about Maharaj Yayati. So he had 5 sons. The first son was Yadhu, and the last son was Puru. At one point in the past time, you heard that Yayati had asked for the youth of his sons, and Yadhu refused, and he gave some superficial reason for refusing. His reason for refusing was that he wanted to enjoy material life, as soon as possible so that he can give it up. Whereas if he delayed the material enjoyment part by giving his youth to his father, and then his father returns the youth later on, it would take longer for him to renounce material enjoyment. So he gave that as a reason. But real reason is because he has some service to do to Krishna, because it is in his line that Krishna, the personality of Godhead, would make his appearance. So he was inspired from within the heart to deny his father's request. Then the 3 middle sons, whose lineages we're hearing about now, They were condemned in the previous narration because they didn't follow the order of their father to renounce their youth for his purposes. And then the last son, Puru, was there. He, following his father's order, gave his youth to his father. Later, his father realized the futility of material enjoyment and returned the youth to his youngest son, Puru, and then renounced the kingdom. So Puru is glorified for this act. And Yadu is also glorified for his act. The three middle sons, they were, I don't know if condemned might be too strong of a word, but they were certainly ridiculed by the Bhagavatam. In any case, we're hearing about their lineages after having heard about the dynasty that extended from Puru. Now he wants to describe the dynasty that comes from Yadu, because in that dynasty, the personality of Godhead appears. So he's qualifying his description of this line by saying that it is supremely pious and it vanquishes the reactions of sinful activities in human society. Simply by hearing this description, one is free from all sinful reactions because it amounts to hearing about the personality of Godhead. Therefore, this is the glory of this particular dynasty. So now, verse 20-21, we'll hear a little something here. Yatra vatirno bhagavan paramatma narakritihi yado sahasrajit proshta nalori puriti sruta chatwara sunavastatras shatajit pratamatmaja mahad hayo renu hayo hayashchiti tatsuta. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the Super Soul in the hearts of all living entities, descended in his original form as a human being in the dynasty or family of Yadu. Yadu had 4 sons named Sahasrajit, Kroshta, Nala, and Ripu. Of these 4, the eldest, Sahasrajit, had a son named Shatajit, who had 3 sons named Mahahaya, Renuhaya, and Haihaya. Okay. Purport. As confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 1-11, Vadanti tat tatavidas tattvam yach ganamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Quote, learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, end quote. The majority of transcendentalists understand only the impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma, for the personality of Godhead is very difficult to understand. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 3, Manushyanam sahasreshu kashche yatati siddhaye yatatamapi siddhanam kashchen mam veti tattvataha. Quote, out of many thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection. And of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth, end quote. The yogis and gyanis, that is, the mystic yogis and the impersonalists, can understand the absolute truth as impersonal or localized. But although such realized souls are above ordinary human beings, they cannot understand how the supreme absolute truth can be a person. Therefore, it is said that out of many siddhas, the souls who have already realized the absolute truth, one may understand Krishna, who exactly resembles a human being, Narakriti. This human form was explained by Krishna himself after he manifested the Virat Rupa. The Virat Rupa is not the original form of the Lord. The Lord's original form is Dvibhuja Shamsundara Muralidhara, the Lord who with 2 hands playing a flute. Yam Shama Sundara Machintya Guna Swarupam. The Lord's form are proof of his inconceivable qualities. Although the Lord maintains innumerable universes within the period of his breath, he is dressed with a form exactly like that of a human being. That does not mean, however, that he is a human being. This is his original form, but because he looks like a human being, Those with a poor fund of knowledge consider him an ordinary man. The Lord says, Avajananti mamudha manusham tanumasritam param bhavamajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Quote, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. Bhagavad Gita 9:11. By the Lord's Param Bhavam, or transcendental nature, he is the all-pervading Paramatma, living in the core of the hearts of all living entities. Yet he looks like a human being. Mayavada philosophy says that the Lord is originally impersonal but assumes a human form and many other forms when he descends. Actually, however, he is originally like a human being, and the impersonal Brahman consists of the rays of his body. Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti. And the purport Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so a lot going on here. So why is the dynasty of Yadu being glorified? So this is answered in this first line of the verse. Yatravatirno Bhagavan Paramatma Narakriti. The reason Yadu's dynasty is being glorified because Yatra here means in that dynasty, the dynasty coming from Yadu. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan Avatirno, has descended in that dynasty. Although he is Paramatma, so Paramatma means the indwelling soul of the universe and the entities within it. That is the meaning of Paramatma. So he pervades everything in this world as the indwelling soul of it. Without the presence of Paramatma, nothing in this world could have existence. Just as the body could not exist without the presence of the soul, the Atma. So Paramatma is the soul of the universe and also the soul of the soul. So although he is the indwelling soul of everything, Narakriti, he is having form like a human being. So this itself is a very, Srila Prabhupada's purport is basically an expansion of this line of the verse. So this is the reason why Yadu dynasty is being glorified. The Lord, Bhagavan, having form like human being, Narakriti, although being the indwelling soul of everything, has descended in that dynasty. So the way Srila Prabhupada's purport flows is that he first points our attention to what is the absolute truth. So that is defined in the very outside of Srimad Bhagavatam. Vedanti tat tat vidas tattvam yashganam adhaya. So the absolute truth is advaya gyanam tattva. This is a very important phrase. Our entire theology is based on this one verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the absolute truth is non-dual consciousness. So what is meant by non-dual? Advaya. Advaya means not to. So what is meant by non-dual? Non-dual means that this entity is self-existent. So self-existent means there is nothing that exists outside of this entity upon which it depends for its own existence. Everything in this world that we know of has dependence on factors outside of itself for its existence. So we are not self-existing entities. We depend on so many other factors for our own existence. Even in a practical way, we depend on food, we depend on other living entities like humans and animals. We depend on nature. There's so many things we depend on for our own existence. So our existence is contingent upon all these other factors, right? So if you keep tracing that out, well, what does that thing depend on? Then you can find a prior cause. And then you can ask about, well, what does that cause depend on? You may find a prior cause. And if you keep taking this question all the way back, then you come to the personality of Godhead, who is the self-existing, uncaused cause of everything that exists, right? So he's self-existing and having no prior cause. If you ask what was prior to that, then that would be the absolute truth. So he is the self-existing, uncaused cause of everything else that exists. That is the meaning of the word advaya. That is the first meaning, that it is a self-existing, uncaused cause of all things that exist. And the other meaning is that everything else that has existence is dependent upon this reality for its existence. So it is you can say it is like the wellspring from which all other existent things depend. A new language I've been using recently is that you can say that God donates his own quality of existence to everything else that exists in this world. So when you look at a chair, when you look at a computer or anything else in this cosmos, when you look at other conscious entities, you see that they exist, but their existence is depending upon the wellspring of existence, which is God. He has donated his existence to those existing objects. If he did not exist, then these other objects could have no existence whatsoever. So in seeing even other entities in this world and seeing even objects like your computer or phone, in a sense, you're also experiencing God just in seeing that. Because those objects could not exist unless God was the ground of their own existence. There's the meaning of non-dual, advaya. Existence itself is quite a mystery, because why is there existence instead of no existence? So this sort of question resists empirical explanation. No science, no philosopher in the material world will be able to answer this question without coming to the conclusion that there must be a God, a self-existing entity who is the very ground of existence for all other things. He's the original being from which all other beings would emerge, right? So if you think of it sort of like a dichotomy, being and beings. So God is being, and from his being, all beings, whether they be animate or inanimate, are arising from his being. So they are not different from him because they depend upon him for their own existence. That is the meaning of Advaya. And Jnana means consciousness. So this being is having awareness. He is awareness, and he's also having awareness as part of his nature. So this is what those who know the truth, tattvavidas, those who are knowers of the tattva, they say like this, that tattva is advaya gyan. So according to the process these different tattvavidas use to understand that reality, they will refer to that reality as Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. They're not referring to a different reality, but they're referring to the same reality, but in accordance with the nature of the process they took to understand it. Depending on how complete their process is, then they will have a complete, more complete, or most complete understanding of that reality. So those who take the paths of Gyan Marg to understand reality as Brahman, they have a complete understanding. Those who take the path of Yoga Marg and understand Paramatma, theirs is more complete. And those who take the path of Bhakti and understand Bhagavan, then their understanding most complete. But everyone is complete, but there's a little bit of hierarchy there, complete, more complete, most complete. But they're not talking about a different reality. They're speaking of the same reality, but in accordance with the nature of the completion of their realization, which depends on the path that they take to realize that reality. Okay, so that's the opening statement. So for those who take the less complete paths of Jnana and Yoga to understand that reality, and thus realize the non-dual truth as Brahman or Paramatma, then Prabhupada is writing here that it may be difficult for them to appreciate how God is having a human form. That is a more complete understanding. So he quotes this verse from Gita, Manusha na sahasreshu kashta yatati siddhaya. Out of many thousands of men, hardly anyone is attaining siddhi. Siddhi means perfection. So perfection means realization of the tattva. That is what siddhi means. Whether you realize the tattva is Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan. Here, siddhaya here specifically means, and Prabhupada's purport here means Brahman realization or Paramatma realization. So out of many thousands of men, one may attain siddhi. They understand tattva as Brahman or Paramatma. That is a very extraordinary realization. Such an entity is not very He's above ordinary humans, as Prabhupada is writing here in his purport. They're above ordinary human beings. Still, yatatamapi siddhana. But even these siddhas who understand tattva as Brahman and Paramatma, kashtema veti tattva, they hardly are able to understand the personality of Godhead. That realization of the non-dual being as a person eludes them, because that person, that the understanding of non-dual being as a person is possible only by the path of bhakti yoga. So Krishna says it in Gita also, right? Bhaktyaham abhijananti. Only through bhakti yoga can you understand this feature. In Brahma Samhita also it says, Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santa sadaiva hridayeshu vilokananti. Prabhupada has also referred to this verse here. Yam shama sundaramachinta gunaswarupam govindamadi purushantamahabhajami. Here this part. So unless the eyes are anointed with the salve of love, premanjana, then they're not able to perceive the Lord and his human feature. So those who are having the less complete realizations of tattva as Brahman and Paramatma, they may come to disbelieve in the personality of Godhead, or not appreciate that the absolute truth can also appear as a human. And what is the reason for this? So Prabhupada is also telling this in his purport. The reason for this is because when we think of, even when I say the word human, then naturally we think of a human of this world, right? This is called egocentrism. So everyone has this in the material world. It is inescapable. Everyone has egocentrism. Egocentrism means you take your way of being as the reference point or the central point for understanding everything, basically everything that exists. So you look at existence from the reference point of your own ego. That is the meaning of egocentrism. So we all have ahankara, and it's very hard to get out of that problem. Pakritihi kriyamana nigunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimutatma kartahamiti. Of course, this verse is a little bit different, but ahankara vimutatma, I'm taking this line where Krishna says we are bewildered, veritably befooled by ahankara, false ego. So you're a human, and I'll just take it for granted that everyone thinks normal here, and we all think that we're humans. So that is our ego. And so egocentrism means that we take our way of being human or our understanding of humanity as a central point to understand what is human. So we hear that God is human, then looking at his humanity from the reference point of our own humanity, we conclude that God can't be human. And that conclusion is actually correct because God is not a human like us. So we're using our own understanding of humanity as a reference point. Then we are actually correct. God is not a human like that. But it doesn't mean he is not human. He is an inconceivable human, or it may be fair to say even he has a form that looks like a human, but to call that form human is at best analogous. Because he's not a human like us whatsoever. He's an extraordinary human having inconceivable potencies. And so in this regard, I wanted to share a quick verse. My time's running out. I want to share a nice verse from Krishna Lila. So in Krishna Lila, the famous story is there, Krishna being bound by Mother Jasoda. So there you know the story well. Mother Jasoda was churning some milk to please Krishna, and Krishna came to have breast milk. As she was feeding him, the milk she was cooking to please Krishna was burning and overflowing. So she put Krishna down to save the milk. Krishna became upset. He made a little bit of mischief. And then Mother Jasoda chased him down to chastise him for his mischief. Finally, she was able to catch Krishna. And then she began trying to bind Krishna with a rope. So when we come to this point in the pastime, Shukadeva Goswami quotes two verses. And these two verses he wants to describe why Madhusudana was not able to bind Krishna. That's the first verse. He's describing that. And in the second verse, he wants to describe why she thought she could bind him. And the two verses are very important. So here in these two verses, we come to just hear that God, having a human form, he's an all-pervading human. So what does that even mean? If you say that to someone, that God is an all-pervading human, that actually doesn't have any meaning for any normal person. Because to be a human, as far as our egocentric understanding is concerned, means to be bound by time and to be bound by space, and also be able to be bound by other objects. But an all-pervading human doesn't have those qualities. So this is this Shukadeva Goswami wants to describe. The import of this verse is to say that God is basically, or Krishna specifically, when having human form, he is an all-pervading human. So na chanta na bahir yasya na purvam na pichaparam purva param bahishantara jagato yo jagatchayaha. So the first line says na chanta na bahir yasya, that he has no inside or outside. Na purvam na apichaparam, he has no beginning or end. So if you have to tie a rope around someone, they have to have a beginning and end, isn't it? If I have to tie a rope around you, there should be some beginning of your body, some end to it. There should be some inside and outside, because I have to put the rope around you, right? So there, I put the rope on one point and then I wrap it around you and tie it to the other side, right? That means you're existing inside the rope. But here it's saying that God has no beginning or end, and he has no inside or outside. So how can you tie something around an entity that has no beginning or end, or no outside or inside? So this point here shows that God is beyond the spatial limitations. Purva aparam. Then here, purva aparam means he existed before everything existed in this world. And aparam, he will continue to exist after everything is dissolved in this world, right? So again, as a non-dual reality, he is the being from which all other beings are emerging, and into whom all other beings will find their final destination. So this phrase wants to show that God, Krishna, he is beyond time. Purvaparam bahishtantar. Jagato yajagaschayaha. And this last line says here, he himself is the universe. He himself is the universe. This means that from him, the universe is appearing. The universe is an effect, whom Krishna is the cause. So that means that the universe itself cannot exist unless it came from Krishna. And the rope is simply a tiny, insignificant little thing inside the universe. So how is Mother Yashoda supposed to tie Krishna, who himself is the cause of unlimited universes, with a tiny rope, which is just a tiny, insignificant part of the universe? So this verse is describing God as not delimited by time, space, or other objects. So it's impossible to bind him. Still, she thought she could bind him. So why was that? Tamatvat majam avyakta martyalingamadokshajam. Well, she thought something. Tamatva, she thought that Krishna was Atmajam. She thought that Krishna was her son. That's why she thought she could do it. Otherwise, if she could see him as an all-pervading entity beyond temporal, beyond time and space and other objects, she would not even attempt such a thing. It's like no one has attempted to bind the universe with a rope. That's impossible. So she didn't see that. All she saw that this was my son, actually. Martyam Lingam, he was having human form. So Martyam Lingam means having human form. So this is how she was able to think that she could tie Krishna. How could she think such a thing? So Acharya is explaining this was due to her prema rasa. The nature of ecstatic love is that it eclipses this aspect of Krishna. So although Krishna is an all-pervading human, that all-pervading aspect becomes eclipsed by love. Just like this is not a good analogy, but I'm just going to use it because of my time. If you look at the sun directly with the eyes, you'll become blind. So the sun of the pure love of Mother Jasoda blinds her to the majestic aspect of the absolute truth. So she just saw him as human and not as an all-pervading human. She didn't see the all-pervading part, just the human part. Adokshajam. This Lord is Adokshajam. Adokshajam means beyond sense perception. The reason for this phrase here, Adokshajam, is to say that Krishna is inside Krishna's form. He is reconciling two inconceivable. He's reconciling two attributes, namely all pervasiveness and limitation. So he has a form which appears limited, but he's unlimited or all pervading. And both attributes are existing harmonious in that form. So that is inconceivable. Adokshaja literally means, we translate it as the transcendence. It means one who is beyond the central perception, or Ada Akshajam, Gyan, one who keeps knowledge coming from the senses beneath it. So when you try to apply logic, your logic is baffled. There's no way that you can conceive of an all-pervading human. You can't conceive of an entity that appears with a limited form, but is simultaneously all-pervasive. That's actually inconceivable. And this is why other spiritualists, they easily come to the conclusion that God is impersonal, because that's a lot easier concept to conclude with logic. But to conclude that there can be a person who's all-pervading, no logic can come to that conclusion. So he's Adokshaja. But it was understood in this way by the love of Mother Jasoda. So Gopika ulukale dhamna babhanda. So she tried to tie Krishna to the motar, pakritam yata, as if he was made of like a material human. Pakritam yata. So who can understand such things without the help of Shastra, without the help of bhakti, characterizes prema? Who can understand such things? It's actually impossible to understand. So Prabhupada ends his purport with that particular point, quoting the verse, Avajananti mamuta manusham tanamai. When he comes as a human, people deride him. Param bhava manjanato. They don't know his transcendental nature as the source of all existence itself and all consciousness itself. So they deride him. This is natural. This is very natural if you're depending on your own faculties to understand that which is beyond your faculties. Then naturally you will make this wrong conclusion and become confused. So this is Prabhupada's purport. This is the reason for the glorification of Yadu's dynasty. That non-dual being who is originally in Krishna has appeared in his dynasty. He is Paramatma, he is all-pervading, and yet he is also a human, having two arms and legs and a mouth and looking very limited. So this is an extraordinary entity. The source of all that exists appearing in this world. So this is why Yadu's dynasty is glorified, and this is why we're hearing about his lineage. Although all those names are, I don't want to say a little boring, but one does not know what is going on. Hearing so many names like this. But for this reason, this is being discussed. So it's 7:55. I usually like to leave 10 minutes, but all these philosophical points came up. So it takes a long time to explain these things. Okay, so let me pause here and see if someone wants to ask some question or make some comment. The jokes in the chat box, I'm just looking at the jokes there. If you have no question, then you can make some comment, anything that you got out of the discussion. Then you can share something that you heard.
I really liked your point that since science, no science can explain how everything exists, so therefore it cannot be coming from anywhere but Krishna. I really like that one.
Yeah, existence is a mystery, isn't it? Science can explain, what something is, maybe. Science can explain how something is in this world because it's contingent, so you can try to find the different things of how it is. But you can't explain that it is. Why is it there whatsoever? That's the real mystery of it all. But because we experience that mystery on a moment-to-moment basis, it's lost to us. That we exist on a moment-to-moment basis is a great mystery, but because it seems very ordinary, so it's lost to us. But then if you keep asking that question, wait, why is there existence at all? So then that will bring you to the wellspring of existence, which is God.
Yeah.
Jagannath, this is John. This is his first time coming to a Bhagavatam class. He has to ask a question.
Well, I was wondering, because I learned that, the symbolism behind the flute and how it has some form of connection to the heart. And I was wondering, when Krishna actually takes human form, is that to the point where he's one that actually touches a person's heart? That's basically pretty much that's what he's that's what he comes to do, to touch the heart of the righteous, right?
Yeah, that's a very nice understanding. So yeah, when in the Bhagavad Gita, you may know the book Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada also brought this up in purport. At one point in the Gita, he shows Arjuna the universal form. So he shows Arjuna his aspect as the entirety of the universe. And when Arjuna saw that, he became frightened, because you can't have a relationship with the entirety of the universe. And even to have awareness of all those aspects can be very frightening and daunting. So then after showing Arjuna that form, then he again showed Arjuna his human form. And immediately Arjuna's mind became pacified, and he came to his natural state of love for Krishna. So the form of Krishna is a form that makes possible for the loving union of the infinite and the finite. Otherwise, it becomes impossible. Just like, for example, I ask you a question. Can you have a loving relationship with an ant? Is it possible?
I mean, if one puts the effort towards it.
No. Try to think about it. Even if you love an ant, can the ant reciprocate with your love? There's not a deep philosophical question. This is a practical question.
Maybe not in the way that we could see, but as you mentioned earlier, everything has...
Okay, that is the answer. The answer is no.
Okay.
The ant is not able to reciprocate your love. Even if you say, I love the ant very much, the ant is not able to reciprocate your love. It will not appreciate, because it is too small and you are too big in comparison. That is the point. You are too big in comparison and I'm very small. It's not also ants, as far as I know, or other insects, they're not able to see three-dimensionally. They can only see two-dimensionally. So they can't even conceive of the notion of a human being. If you step on an ant, all it knows is some monster is there, but it can't see three-dimensionally to understand, even that you are a human. So that is because we're all limited. I'm limited as a human, you're limited as a human, and that ant is limited as an ant. So because of the limitation, we're not able to establish a proper loving relation. So God is like, in this analogy, God is like this vibhutva. He has this quality of all pervasiveness, and that's too grand a thing to have a relationship with when we're just like these tiny, insignificant ants. But in the form of Krishna, the absolute all-pervading reality is appearing before a devotee in a way that a loving union can be established, where the infinite and the finite can commune with one another in a loving relationship. That is the concept of Krishna. So as you say, you are correct. His form with flute coming in this way is to attract the hearts of the finite living entities. Without such features, then it would not be possible for us to even conceive of a loving union with such a reality as great, as a source of all existence. It would be too grand for us to relate to, due to our inherent limitations.
All right, thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah, some of these questions, I know it seems philosophical, we have to think practically. We are limited entities. We can't just do whatever we want. If you want to fly, you cannot do it because you are limited. You can get on an airplane, but your getting on the airplane just shows the extent of your limitation by yourself. You can't just fly by your own power. You can't breathe underwater by your own power, because we are limited. We have so many limitations. So similarly, we can't relate to things that are very grand and things that are extremely small. We can't relate to those things because of our limitation. So that is the nature of being limited, actually. So only if God, who's unlimited, agrees to reciprocate, to relate to the limited, does it become possible. Otherwise, it's impossible. Something too large and too small, it's not possible to establish sambandha with that. So that's why I like to give my anti-example. Even if you try to establish sambandha with it, you can't. At least it will not be able to reciprocate. Yes. Others.
Jai Jagannath Prabhu, there is some heavily philosophical question in the chat from Emily.
Speaking of 3 different realizations of God, are there similar different levels of soul, self-realization, realizing Satchit Ananda on difficult levels, different levels? No. So, no.
No. Thank you.
That is the answer.
Next question.
Yeah. Okay. Any final something anyone wants to say or share? Maybe a naive question. What's the significance of Krishna's flute? Well, you know, these sorts of questions, when you ask, what is the significance? It's not a naive question, it's a natural question, but the reason it's hard to answer these sorts of questions is because God is the source of everything. So when we ask about things like the significance or the cause of things, for a reality that doesn't have any prior cause, you can't really give an answer. You can talk about things that have causal relationships in the material world, but if something has no cause, then it's very difficult to speak about it because, in other words, it's the cause of its own self. So it just is. And you can't speak about it in terms of having prior causes and prior meanings and significances. But in terms of the exchange of love that Krishna is characterized by with this particular feature, the significance of the flute is to attract the hearts of his beloveds. That is the purpose of the flute. So oftentimes in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we speak about hearing the flute of Krishna, hearing his flute song. Right now, because our love is not yet evolved or present, so we can't hear the flute song of Krishna. We only hear the sounds of the material world and become bewildered by those sounds. But if you develop your love of God, then you can hear the flute song of Krishna, which will attract your heart comprehensively. So that is the significance of the flute song, is to attract the hearts of his beloveds. So the purpose of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is to become a beloved. And then you can hear his flute song. Otherwise, you're not hearing it. And that is the cause of our suffering in this world, that we're not able to hear the call of our beloved's flute song, our lover's flute song. So you can give an answer like that. Okay, then. Thank you all very much. Then I think I'll release you from this. I thank you very much for tolerating me for as long as you have. That's very kind of you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantarashna Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai Jagannath Prabhu ki jai.
Go Primanandi, Hari Hari Bo.
Thank you, Jai Jagannath Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming on, for contributing to class.